Hi everyone, welcome to Life Edge, because life just doesn't have to be mediocre. Joining me today, coming back fresh from Las Pampas in Argentina, we've got Dr. Susan Nash. Hi Susan, how are you?
Great, exactly. I was in the Silicon Pampas in Buenos Aires.
So what conference did you go to?
It was the AAPG International Conference, and so we had basically all about energy.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm going to up your volume a little bit here. Anyway,
Okay,
we've got a great show today. Let's go. This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation at www.relate.com, your training and video partner. And we are back. Susan, would you like to do the honors?
Absolutely. So we have a fantastic guest today. His name is Alec Walker, and he's with DelfinSia's for a while now. And what I really like about DelfinSia's is that they're really taking machine learning and artificial intelligence to a whole new dimension, and we're here to find out how and why.
All right. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Our pleasure. Well, you're doing fun things, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. It's fun. It's tiring, but it's fun. You hear that from any entrepreneur, right? Or hopefully you do.
Yep.
So give us a little background about yourself first, Alec. What's your background?
Sure. Yeah, so let's see. I grew up in Houston, Texas, where I am right now. I went to Rice University for undergraduate, where I was chemical engineering as well as Asian studies. And that worked out to be a lucky combo because of Rice's goal at the time for more expansion of their international reputation. So I got to do some research internationally. I wound up going to North Korea for a short period of time, which could derail us. We should probably not talk about that too much. And then worked for Shell for about 4 years, moved around inside of Shell, went to business school at Stanford with the goal of helping companies like Shell, big multinationals, to act more entrepreneurially and set up startup incubator programs and things like that. And I did that work for about 2 years following graduation from business school, and then got back in touch with a software turnkey solution providing company that we'd hired when I was at Shell, and those are my two co-founders now at Delfin.
So you got interested in machine learning and analytics on that side of the entrepreneurial territory. So how did you get interested in that and data science?
Say it again. What's the difference between data science?
How did you get interested in data science?
Oh, well, for me, that interest first started when I was at Shell. I guess it was the first position I had. I was in chemical catalysis, so pretty downstream in business. And there was this acronym from our new CEO at the time. It was ESSA, and that stood for Eliminate, Simplify, Standardize, and Automate. And I fell in love with that acronym. It was really exciting for me to try to figure out, whenever I was doing work and starting to understand the workflow, what could I do to accomplish any one of those 4 goals in the process? And so I started writing Visual Basic macros and trying to automate little bits here and there, or go to managers and say, hey, we could cut this process out. It's superfluous at this point, or things like that. And that kind of behavior was rewarded in Shell. So I kept doing it and got more and more interested in it. The truth is, now that I'm at Delfin and we have data scientists who are world-class on our team, the little things that I work on and show off, and the things that I had started off with, are cute to them, and they can help us do a lot more than I could ever accomplish, which is why I'm kind of on the front end and the one on the call today.
That's great. So what are some of the projects specifically that you got involved with at first?
With Delfin?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the very first one, this actually predates our founding the company. My co-founders have that software company. I want to call it a software consultancy, but that kind of implies that they get recurring revenue from continuing to issue iterations on some sort of software. They offer turnkey solutions, but in a consulting model. They come into oil companies, figure out what a problem is, develop a solution, make sure it works, and hand it off. So yeah, there's Atulya on the screen, and then just below him, I think you'll find Rajul. Those two guys run Astron International, and they've been doing it for 20, 25 years now and are really, really good at it. So enough of their clients had come to them saying, hey, we're having this problem with retiring subject matter experts, and when they leave behind all of this interesting unstructured documentation. It's not just interesting, it's kind of crucial, and that expertise is lost. The new generation of employees, people kind of like me when I was working for Shell, young and inexperienced and having to learn as I went, typically from people like those retiring subject matter experts on the way out, don't know how to do the job the same way that our predecessors did. So they were trying to develop a tool that could scale, that wouldn't just be a one-off tool for one client, but could instead become a kind of ubiquitous tool for all of the industry. So the first client was BASF, and we're allowed to talk about that, thanks to BASF's generosity. And they were pretty incredulous when we came to them and said, all right, we got a solution for you. It's natural language processing. That's a burgeoning branch of data science, text analytics. The way the tool will work is you ask a question, and rather than having to ask it to a subject matter expert who can then look through and find where they've solved that problem in the past, you can just ask the question to our computer program, and it'll act like that subject matter expert, read through all of the documents it has access to, and come back with curated answers that reflect an understanding of the intent of your question. So they were kind of like, I don't know if you can really do that, and but we're willing to let you try it, and if it works, we can become a reference. So how's that sound? So now that has happened, and the tool has worked pretty well for them, they have become a reference, and we've started to work with other customers. I can't mention all the names, unfortunately. It seems to be, I'm still new to this side of the table in oil and gas. When I was at Shell, I was kind of on the client side. But it seems to be either you get the client's name and the case study, and you can talk about it openly, like the example I just gave, or you get revenue. And at some point, we got to get revenue. So since we're a startup, we're kind of moving towards that. We don't get to mention as much about it. I can talk about use cases generally, but I can't connect them to client names. In fact, I have a humongous list. It'd be fun to show you guys.
So is what you're doing similar to what IBM's Watson does, which is basically a huge search engine? It can grab information from millions of sources real quickly and come back with what you need. And what you were saying about losing all of that experience, it's funny. We were talking about that at work the other day, how corporate cultures, they don't care if they lose it until they lose it. Then they go, we lost everybody. We just laid off a ton of people. Now we don't have... It's very short-sighted, but it happens all the time. And so what you're talking about is saving that corporate culture or the corporate foundation of information and knowledge so that it's not lost.
Yeah, I want to react to what you just said and then come back to IBM Watson. So when I was at Shell, we had, and I'm sure they still have, a program called ROCK, and it stands for Retention of Critical Knowledge. And the concept, as I understood it and witnessed it with the retiring subject matter experts around me when I was moving around the company, is that somebody in HR who's not a domain expert comes in and tries to help the retiring subject matter expert go through their documents one at a time and label them and resort them and reorganize them in different folders, and that's arduous and time consuming and subjective. So it's a big issue, but it's even though it's how we got started, it's only one of many issues that a tool like ours can address. And just another, few quick examples, like the opposite of people leaving, when you have brand new people and they're a net liability until they're trained, you want that onboarding process to be as quick as possible, and as thorough as possible. And if it's just rote training, then it's hard to make sure they're engaging versus when they can ask questions and that sort of thing. Everything from processing daily drilling reports to looking for total organic content when you're trying to figure out what to value a lease at and what to bid. And there's been quite a lot of use cases that have opened up to us that we hadn't considered just because we'd gotten started with one in particular. But about Watson, the tool that we've developed is different from Watson's finished product in one major way, but the deployment process and the business model and kind of the way we're targeting the market are also different. So in terms of the tool, the way I've described it so far, you ask a question, it looks through, it's kind of like a search engine, it looks through the unstructured information, textual files, old, emails, reports, compliance documents, manuals, whatever you give it access to, comes back with an answer. That's the IBM Watson claim as well. Mm-hmm. Our tool, in addition, if you give it a spreadsheet, will fill in your spreadsheet. Or if you give it a database, it'll look through and try to find, where are there answers scattered across the unstructured documentation that might be good fits for your spreadsheet. And then you can click on them and see where they came from, and sometimes there's conflicting values or it's not totally clear, and so you can look through the different options and say, ooh, this is the one I wanted. So it still requires the person doing that to have some expertise to know what's what, and that's also true when answering questions directly. That's one difference as I understand it. I haven't played around with a finished application of Watson myself. But another big difference, and I don't want to make claims that I fully understand Watson here, so just in general, when I'm talking about the market, it's kind of a Goldilocks situation is how I see it, how we see it at Delfin. You have these brand new companies that are really small and really focused on one specific kind of corpus or one specific use case in the oil industry. Maybe they're looking at, a certain kind of legal document. And they're really, really good at extracting value and answering questions using natural language processing, the way that we do, just on that one very narrow use case. That's like the baby bear of the Goldilocks analogy, right? And then you have these other giant consultancies that are working on artificial intelligence and machine learning and some amount of natural language processing too, across tons of industries all at once. The challenge with the first is obvious. If you want them to help you do something in a new territory, they're not able to because it's outside their domain, right? And the challenge with the second, the Papa Bear kind of companies, is perhaps less obvious, but I'll try to explain it. Is if you have a platform that is designed for a general use case, the more general it is, the more it's the lowest common denominator. So you think about, like, here's a use case that makes a lot of sense in finance, and the way that sentences are interpreted and that lexicons are generated and features are extracted and creamed and evaluated against each other makes a lot of sense in finance. Some of those methods aren't going to work so well in oil and gas. So what tends to happen is you start with a blank slate in every case, and then you need the company itself, the client, to build up the working tool with the service provider. And it takes a long time to do it that way. And that we've heard that from a lot of companies that we're starting to work with now, who've worked with bigger consulting style companies in the past before working with us. And they complain about how it takes a long time and it's very expensive because it requires so much man hours from the service provider side. So we aim to be really quick, really cheap, oil and gas focused, spin up a tool that works as quickly as possible. It's not quite at the point where you can just, the equivalent of Microsoft Word, you go on the website, download it, click install, and it just starts working, and now you've got the Microsoft Office suite. You still have to make sure that it fits with your use case and your but we're really fast doing that as compared to the Papa Bear stuff. So we're trying to be the Mama Bear in the analogy. Hope that makes sense.
So would you say part of your solution is kind of a really advanced content management system as well?
Yeah, so content management, yeah, there's a few, I like that category. When people say chatbot, I had a long and really fun conversation, more of a debate really, with one of the heads of the corporate venture capital teams in one of these oil majors, who was saying that it's going to be impossible to impress anyone in his company with a chatbot. And I kept saying, well, we're not a chatbot. Don't call us a chat. Like, we're, you know, I spent some time researching, you know, chatbots and which ones pick up and which ones are interesting and which ones capture public imagination and get people going. And there's some really interesting things going on in China, where I spent some time before coming back to Houston. This Delfin thing related to chatbots, and they're very convincing. That's the goal often, is you're typing a conversation and you think you're talking to a human, or you're having a phone call and you think that the other end of the call is a person, but it's a recording and it's just doing a good job of understanding what you're saying and that sort of thing. We have that in the US too, right? Call any big company and you get a recording and it's a decision tree and it tries to understand keywords from what you say and then point you in the right direction and eventually get to a human, right? That whole concept is about convincing people that you're dealing with human level intelligence. That's not our goal at all. We don't even try to do that. It's more about being compelling than being convincing. So are you getting results that make sense to help you get your job done? Not, are you impressed that this is acting like a human?
Right.
So you're first demoing our tool, we'd show it to an oil company, and someone would be excited to ask it a question and say, I want to ask it a question. Hey, Sia, can you order me a pizza? And of course it would come back to them like, I don't know what you're talking about. We'd say, hey, this is the tool applied to refinery operations engineering. And a corpus of data related to that. So ask it questions about that. And the first question is, how many rigs are active in the Permian? And well, that's very upstream and that's not contained in the corpus that it's looking through. So it doesn't even know how to interpret that question. And it just comes back saying, sorry, I've got nothing. And then, we don't want people to be disappointed by that. We don't want them to think that it's a, compelling chatbot sort of thing. So this, this knowledge management and control over your files and your own resources inside the company. That's where we're going with this. It's about unstructured data management.
That's really interesting. I think people are getting so used to the Hey Google or OK Google or Alexa, and 9 out of 10 times you don't. If you ask anything really important.
Well,
My phone just started talking to me. Oh, this is crazy.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Mine did. It's right next to me. So.
Oh gosh, I said the word. I guess I've got.
You said, hey.
Now, if
you said, hey.
I didn't know I had it on my phone. This is a brand new phone.
But here's the question. Okay, but Alec, this question is like leading to something like. Okay, I look at a lot of technology and a lot of companies every day, and when you said that there was one venture capital or technology ventures group that said we're not going to be impressed with any kind of chatbot function, that reminds me of how many people are in the same space. So how do you differentiate yourself from all the others who are mining unstructured data? Because that's Watson, that's Azure has it built in. How do you differentiate yourself?
Yeah, so, I feel really lucky. When I first started, my understanding of data science, in particular natural language processing, was low. I didn't know the difference. I didn't know how to tell the difference between what we call vaporware, which is like flashy presentations with nothing behind it, and the real deal, right? So I had the experience of working with Atulya and Rajul when I was at Shell. And I was really impressed with their ability to build a tool that was flexible enough to handle multiple stakeholders across the same company. Because, in oil and gas, you have these silos. They each have their own P&L. They each have their own, incentives and incentive structures and goals and that sort of thing. They built a tool that worked across all of those and was adding value to each. And they built that tool simultaneously. And I looked really good because I was the, shell side product manager saying, well, we need this, and let me go research what this group wants. And so I had some faith. But now that I kind of get it more, I feel really lucky that like I'm working with people who have made something that really works, and it's awesome. So then how we distinguish ourselves is through our strategy in that sense. We're not about boasting about what is, the sort of promise the world and then under-deliver, but at least you got the client because you overpromised. That strategy is not what we're going for. Instead, we're trying to become thought leaders and be more about educating, hence trying to do things in AAPG, trying to do things in SPE. I've been working with the Digital Transformation Study Group in Society of Petroleum Engineers and just got elected co-chair. And that's mostly because I'm so amped to volunteer time to help sort fact and fiction in this space, and so everybody else is too busy, so I get elected. It's not, so that's why I feel lucky about this, right? If the tool works, you don't have anything to hide. The biggest challenge there, though, is sometimes prospective clients will want more than we can offer because of what they've heard already is possible. And rather than correct them and say, sorry, I don't think that's possible, I'm incredulous, we kind of have to say, well, maybe you know better than we do, and maybe there's something out there that's going better. And what I hate is if they commit so much to something else that they can't switch gears later. Like if the very first company that comes along and promises the world, and then you just invest in them. Well, not only have you tried them and maybe given them some revenue to start off to see if it's working. Now you're invested in their success, right? So if somebody else comes along with a better product later, or you learned your lesson from the first implementation, it's now too late to backtrack and try another company out. So I'm all about, why don't you try out as many companies as you can, create a public proof of concept, maybe use public data for it so that you don't have any, need to worry about data breaches or that sort of thing. And just make it an open competition and try out whatever tools you can find in the market.
Actually, that's a great idea. I remember when I was a VP of IT in a company back in the late 80s, early 90s, CASE, computer-aided software engineering, had just made its appearance, and everybody was talking about CASE this, CASE that. And it was new. Not a lot of people didn't know how to use it, and I was one of the people kind of spearheading some of the use of these. And I would always tell people the same exact thing. Invest in it. Spend some money. Even if this isn't the product you keep, get familiar with it. Even if you throw it out later, you've invested, you've helped, because eventually we're all going to benefit from whatever research is done. And there were some good companies in the space. I don't know if very many are left anymore, because it got swallowed up by other things, and then it just got incorporated as an add-on to other development tools. But it was a great idea. And what you're talking about now is that we're kind of at that entry point of real AI or real data or big data management and retrieval and storage and natural language processes, which didn't work all that well 10 years ago. We're getting better and better at it. And you're right, if nobody invests in it, it won't go anywhere. So the more we do invest and the more you take a couple of risks, we're all going to benefit.
Yeah, and I agree with you. When you say invest in it, I'm thinking about invest in the concept.
Yes.
And try to figure out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
But if you invest too much in one company too early, then it's hard to say, whoops, maybe I should check out this other company.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
that there's some risks in there that can be informed risks, and you want to inform yourself first. The other kind of investment that I don't like so much is, this is a hard pill to swallow perhaps for some of our listeners, but I hold firmly, coming from Silicon Valley recently, that it's going to be tough for oil companies to get best in class data science people. It's going to be really hard. they're going to do a good job recruiting data science people who have, you think of T-shaped people, right? That's this goal. Everyone wants to be T-shaped. You're very deep in one area, and then you kind of have broad high-level knowledge in other areas. Some people are like a pi symbol, and they have a couple areas where they're kind of deep. Oil and gas can probably do well getting people who are, both data scientists as well as geoscience people, or they have some experience with machine learning as well as with reservoir engineering. They will come to oil, and they'll be great employees. But when it comes to like straight software, super deep tech people, they want to work for software.
Sure.
They want what they're doing and the organization and culture and pace of the company to revolve around their expertise. They don't want to be siloed with IT in a big industrial company where the culture and the cycle time for spinning things up, and even if they're world-class data scientists, it's just going to be hard for an oil company to create internally anything that any company could create externally and spin out as a full software product. So we aim to be that software product in natural language processing for unstructured data management. And it hurts me to see oil companies try to build internal competition to our tool, because a lot of the people we talk to there are awesome people, but they have their hands tied, not because oil companies are bad managers or anything, just because they're oil companies. They need to run their companies like oil companies. My analogy there is like, we open a restaurant in Houston and we decide, let's also make our own wine. It's going to be tough. Like the wineries in California or Argentina, maybe, right? Stick to making food and customer service, and outsource the wine part. Right?
Yep, that's true. Those are really good points. Susan, we're almost out of time. Do you want to wrap up with a question?
So there's a lot of construction going on. I don't know if you can tell. So haven't
hear that.
So anyway, but we have a question that we usually ask, and that is, in your life, what is it that has given you an edge?
I think it's my sister. I have an older sister who is my best friend and has been my entire life. And she is very supportive of me being kind of weird. So I am like unabashedly weird, especially when I'm channeling my sister. So I'll spread out, chasing multiple interests simultaneously, and this whole Asia studies and chemical engineering. There'd only been one other combo like that in Rice's history. And what did I get from it? Well, I got positions at the Baker Institute for Public Policy, and I got to go do research in Singapore and Japan, and like that kind of thing has really helped me. So I think often, this is culture we're trying to build in Delfin. Often what makes people who they are is something that's pretty unique and interesting, but because of social challenges like stereotype threat or overly formal rather than professional business culture, people wind up not behaving the way that they naturally would and not exploring things according to their interests the way that they would. And I think that's really sad. And eventually it's like that story about the elephant that's tied to the pole, and it grows bigger, and eventually it's so big it could just walk away and knock down the tree, but it's still tied to the pole and it's just stuck there, Like, I feel really lucky to have had the right support in my life, but I'm just like, well, I'll go dance around as a weird elephant, That's a weird analogy, maybe as an example.
That's a good one. And we appreciate your time.
For me to quickly show the tool, or if we're all out of time, I can just include a link or something.
We're kind of out of time. However, if you want to give us some more information, or we'll have you back on if you're willing to come back on.
Oh, heck
do a
yeah.
part 2.
This is fun. You guys got great questions. And another reason why I'm kind of front end of Delfin is that I like the limelight. Everyone's always teasing me like, oh, you love to talk and have people listen to it and stuff. So
it's fun.
As long as I can endure the teasing from my team, then I'm happy to come back on. But why don't we can end when we're out of time, and then I can send some links. From our website, you can get onto examples of the tool.
Sure, that'd be great. We'll put them down in the show notes so that people can go, and after they watch the interview, they can go and take a look. That would be great.
That would be,
Yeah.
and definitely we'll also share it in some social media sites, so you'll get quite a few views. So that's all good. People are all very curious about seeing the tool once we've talked about it.
Okay. Well, sorry to build up suspense and then run out of time. That's my fault.
No, that's good. And you know
It's all
what?
good.
It's what you've been saying is really interesting too. So I'd love to have you come back on. I know Susan would too. And
absolutely.
just do a part 2. And in fact, we can get you on pretty quickly. So if we want to do this soon, Susan and Sarah can coordinate times, and we'll get you on quickly.
Sure. One more really quick idea.
Yeah.
Shameless plug for one of my heroes. Our chief scientist has become the most watched speaker from the most recent Pi data. So he's kind of the real, genius brain behind how the tool is able to handle with very sparse matrices and really difficult to handle corpuses and come back with intelligent answers. So if you want to ask more like deep tech questions, maybe I could swap out with him next time. But we can discuss that offline.
Okay, sure. That sounds good. Well, again, Alec, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing and I like the way you said things because it just makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we're all at an exciting time right now, and it's only going to get better. So it's going to be real interesting. And Susan, as always, good to see you. Good to have you back.
Thank
I was scared
you.
you were going to get kidnapped down there, but you made it. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe you fought your way out. Anyway, if you're watching, thanks for watching. Take a look at the show notes. We'll have information on Alec's company and the links he's going to send. So have a good one, everyone, and we'll see you next time on Life Edge. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And it's a wrap.